Hello, my friends. Welcome to Let's Talk, produced by Wise Mindly Inc. I'm your host, Coach Shay Marville. In this space, we dive into transformative conversations that hopefully inspire you to grow, heal, and have a deeper connection to yourself and to the world around you. So, let's talk, let's connect, let's grow together. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Let's Talk. On today's episode, I have a fantastic author, writer, wellness strategist, researcher, and she's just written a book called Claim Your Brain. Jocelyn Pepe. Jocelyn, welcome to Let's Talk. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Shay. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
I'm laughing because, you're glowing, and I think you're glowing because, one, you're beautiful. Because you're getting such a great response to this book. Mm-hmm. And I want to know what inspired it and what you're going to do next. But what inspired this book?
That's a beautiful question. And I am radiating from the inside out because the response has been super. And what inspired me to write this book was my own journey with mental health as a daughter and as a mother. And I feel like this conversation needs to come to the table for all people so that we all understand the ripple effect our mental health has. And so not only did I struggle with some of the female hormonal challenges of mental health,
right,
and that part of mental health and brain health, but also I was impacted by other people's mental health. And so when I absorbed everybody else's mental health experiences without the tools to understand what was mine and what was other people's, I internalized everything. And that led to increasing psychological stress and such a demise in my own well-being that I had to find my way in the dark from a very dark place. And I wanted to put everything in one place that I had learned so people don't have to find their way in the dark and they can have tools across their whole health in order to support them better.
Now, it was really in your, would you say, like late 30s and 40s that you started to experience anxiety or anxiousness? Or when did you become aware that something was wrong?
I feel like I knew I was struggling in my teenage years when puberty hit. And then with every P in women's mental health or women's health milestone, puberty, pregnancy, perimenopause, yes, I feel like I struggled a little bit more with the onset of each one, not understanding anything about what was happening or having the tools or the support or the conversations around me to deal with it. So I feel like anxiety started in high school and drove me. And then as I had babies and miscarriages, yes, I had increasing challenges with my mental health and difficulties in relationships, started to increase anxiety. And throughout my 20s and culminating in my later 30s was the precipice of the real decline where I had suicidal ideation and I really wanted just somebody to take care of me because of how overburdened I felt. And from there, I went into overcompensating, I feel,
yes,
and led to burnout and a leave of absence from work.
Right.
And it all culminated 4 years ago with a traumatic brain injury.
Okay, before we go there, though, can you describe what you were talking about in terms, or referring to in terms of your teenage years? Because so many people have a hard time putting words to how they are feeling and even understanding that the anxiousness or the feeling like you're not enough or very self-conscious, I'm throwing these out there, are forms of anxiety. What was it for you?
It was, for me, I feel it was probably more depression and then anxiety that I couldn't get out of a situation that I wanted out of, or I couldn't change a situation that I wanted to change. And so I used to write my parents letters, and that was my way of self-expression. And so I would write them letters to share how I was feeling. And it was really, I feel, depression that I was experiencing more so than anxiety in those years, because it was an inability to control things around me or change things that I wanted to change.
How did your parents respond?
Yeah, they were great. They always received my letters. And my mom actually gave me one of the letters I have written to them in my recent years as I've been going on this journey of writing the book, and how self-expressed I truly was, but I just felt nobody was listening. And that was my interpretation of the situation, because everybody around me was dealing with their own things in their own ways as best as they possibly could.
Yes.
But my interpretation was, nobody's listening, so I'm just going to shut myself off. Like, I'm going to shut my voice down. And that's part of the true of living true in my business, is staying true to ourselves. And I lost my voice slowly until it was totally, I felt gone.
And do you think that you learned how to suppress that voice, and then that, like in your teenage years, and then that became the tool that you used until you couldn't use it?
I would say what happened was I started to live in a place of fear of using my voice. So it really was a nervous system response, like a shutdown, slowly shut down. Nobody's listening to me, so I'm not going to speak up. I'm not going to speak my voice. That continued up until, fairly recently, when I embarked on this journey of reclaiming my own mental health in order to heal. And so that slow suppression came from a fear-based nervous system response,
Yes.
but also nobody's hearing me, so why bother talking? I'm just gonna. My coping mechanism was to become hyper independent. I don't need anybody. I'm not going to ask anybody for anything. I'm going to do it all on my own.
Right. But then, and then as you evolved as an adult and into womanhood, you got married, you had children. Would the anxiety increase, or the depression, not anxiety, would the depression increase with every new sort of event that's supposed to make you so happy?
Yeah, every event did make me so happy. And that was the paradox that I had a really hard time reconciling, was that everything was making me so happy. Every birth of a child, every milestone, I lived and adored all of that with my kids. And on the inside, there was still a part that was suffering. And so the depression did increase. And actually, at that time, the anxiety also increased with the birth of every child, and just the new amount of responsibility and the lack of things that I can control with 3 kids.
Yes.
Really was challenging for me. And that was, I remember my littlest one, even when she was probably 4, we were lying in bed and she said to me, "Mom, I can feel your anxiety." And that made my heart stop.
Wow.
And I was like, she is such an empath.
Yes. Yes, you've mentioned that
Yeah.
before. Yeah.
And so, wow, what a response to say, something's happening here. And I was at that point in time, I was alone. I was divorced with 3 kids. And so that coping mechanism of trying to control everything really kicked into overdrive in order to manage or mitigate the anxiety.
And did your awareness of the anxiety inspire you to study more, like to go deeper and go back to school and do your master's in psychology? Like what was your response, sort of like, I'm going to go to school for this?
It was. That has been my response. My response to go back for my master's, the reason I did that was because I wanted to understand what was going on for me and for the people in my life who were struggling with their own mental health. So I wanted to better understand myself so that I could move forward in a new way. And I really started to learn what the model in the book shares is there's lots of ways we can take care of our mental health. And it's for me, is not a chemical imbalance in my brain. It was life circumstances.
Break this down slightly, because we often talk about depression as we've identified it as a disease and a chemical disorder for some, but not for all.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that, like for yourself?
I would love to, because in my early days, before I even decided to write a book, I met a man who was writing a book called "You're Not Depressed, You're Unfinished," and Ardashir like inspired me, and I was like,
Yes.
"Wow, you're writing this, and this is what I believe." So I'm going to keep studying more about this, and I'm going to share what I already had thought of, which was my model around true mental health, which starts with our relationship to ourselves. So when I talk about this, I'm talking about from my own experience, which was mild to moderate depression, not moderate to severe, not major depressive disorder, which is a different category, which is where, yeah, it gets into a different conversation. But from my perspective, I didn't have a good, healthy relationship with myself. So that was the first and foremost thing that was really adding to my depressive state, because I was really harsh with myself. And my inner voice didn't start harsh. It grew harsh with external circumstances and external voices that I accumulated over time. So that was really hard. And then my external relationships were struggling. So they weren't healthy.
Yes, yes.
And so that also eroded my mental health. And then from there, like, I was working out, I was eating well, I've always been into health and nutrition, and that was not enough. And I think that's where people need to go a little bit deeper in to take care of their mental health. So I went deeper into my emotional health and my emotional well-being, and I had suppressed anger. I did not want to acknowledge anger. I could not be with anger. I did not express anger. It literally sat bottled up inside of me.
Wow.
So there was a suppression of emotion that really compounded the depression, yes, and then the inner thoughts and the mental health. And so what I turned to was spirituality and trusting that there was something bigger at play, and that the universe had me in times when I felt like I was in a deep crisis.
Do you know why you couldn't express anger?
Because in my early years, my very first adverse childhood experience was a conflict.
Okay.
Yeah. And I did go deep into this in therapy and EMDR. It was a conflict. And from that moment, unconsciously, and this is how it happens for us, is I unconsciously suppressed anger, seeing it as something bad. And then from there, I would just internalize it. Even if I was angry, I didn't speak it. So it was just quiet.
Wow.
Yeah, so all that anger was sitting inside of me, and it actually turned into resentment.
Yes.
Yeah, it was really, really unhealthy, and a really unhealthy emotional environment that I was living in inside of myself.
And then as you get older, I think one of the great revelations of midlife and your hormonal change is that you have less capacity to hold all of those things. Did you find that you couldn't keep the anger down anymore?
Yes. It's interesting because I can't tell if it was midlife or perimenopause, or if it was the change in my brain from a brain injury, because they also say that can change your mood and your emotions, and you might experience outbursts or anger. And not that I ever went that far, but I did learn to consciously express my anger in a way that I wasn't strong enough to express in my past. And so that's been a beautiful gift of that ability to express where I felt things were unjust and really vocalize and verbalize and stand up for myself, even if it meant people not liking it, pushing back, getting angry back to me.
Can you tell us what happened? How did you get the brain injury?
Yeah, so I'm an overachiever. That was a coping mechanism.
No kidding.
So it starts there. And I was training for a triathlon. So I had gotten into triathlon as a means of coping through my divorce. It was the thing I catapulted into because physical exercise, as all of the research is showing, is one of the best things for our mental health. as good as lots of different medications that are being prescribed.
Yes.
And so I turned to that, which had always been my way of releasing. I've always been very active and in my body, because getting into my body, yeah, so versus neck up, living up above my brain, exercise gets you neck down more somatically,
Right.
versus living in my thoughts. So I really got into triathlon training, and it was a place of solace for me. It was a place of healing. It was a place of working through my, I feel emotional talking about it. Like, it was a place of working through everything.
It's okay.
Yeah. And so I had got to a place where I was doing really well, and I was having so much fun, and it was an outlet for me, and I would be riding as the sun was rising in the morning. And so then I had elevated my training, and I had been doing short distance sprint in Olympic, and I had elevated my training to go into a half Ironman.
Yeah.
And one morning on my daughter's birthday, I went out riding early in the morning, and I in a tri bike, you're in aero position, so I was training on my tri bike, and there's no brakes, and so I trailed too close to the rider in front of me, and I think a gust of wind came up, and I immediately thought in my brain, "Oh my goodness, I'm gonna crash!"
Oh God.
Instantly blacked out, and I didn't wake up until I was on the ground, being immobilized by the ambulance. I don't know how long, 10 to 15 minutes later. So I was unconscious until they were immobilizing me and putting my neck in a brace. I went head first, face first into the ground. I lost some teeth. My jaw wouldn't open. I spent years in rehab in Toronto at a TMJ clinic to get my jaw back working, multiple MRIs, physically healed. And what I had no idea of was post-concussion syndrome, and the experience of having to navigate what that meant for a new way of living that I wasn't prepared for. So when you talk about midlife incapacity, it collided for me because midlife happened, but then my brain literally, I don't know, halved or even less incapacity, and I had to entirely restructure the way I lived.
And you had to relearn you had to learn how to use your brain. You had never, we don't think about that. But your emotions, like, were you emotional all the time, or were you still suppressing?
I feel like in those years I was probably a little bit angry because it meant the end of my training. They said, every practitioner was like, get back on your bike, go out for a run. And I couldn't run because of the banging of my brain. I got back on the bike because they said it would help me mitigate the fear. For up until last year, actually, I had PTSD going over bridges. So like the Skyways in Burlington and St. Catharines, like I couldn't drive over. I would literally want to go 20 kilometers an hour because I had this terrifying fear that I was going to drive off the edge. And it was unfounded, but it was post-concussion.
I have that, and I didn't have a concussion.
Yeah.
I cannot go over the Skyway. I'm almost, once I drove over, and I swear my eyes were closed, which seems very, very dangerous. But aside,
Yeah.
no, oh my God. Wow. So what were the steps that you took? I mean, and you talk about it in the book, but like, can you talk about it a little bit? Like the steps that you had to take to relearn?
Well, first of all, I had to slow down. The choice was taken away from me to go faster or go slower. I only had one speed now, and it was slow. I could choose to be with my children and drive them to their sports. I could choose to exercise. I could work. I could do one thing, and I could only do one thing for a few hours. I put my master's on hold, and then I eventually went back to it because I felt like that learning process would re-engage my brain and help with the neuroplasticity, and so I did, and that felt good and meaningful for me. But now I have to be incredibly diligent with my sleep. So I think this is the gift, actually, that came from that. Most people are running around unconscious to how our brains work. And the gift I got was an increased like incredibly heightened sensitivity to anything that was impacting my brain. So now I know how lack of sleep impacts the brain at a really deep level. Now I know what alcohol does to the brain at a really significant level because I had to stop drinking entirely. Because what I was trying to do with food, sleep, nutrition, my mental and emotional health was decrease neuroinflammation in my brain.
Right.
And we get neuroinflammation from lots of different things, all those things, food, lack of sleep, not being healthy. We also can get neuroinflammation from increased cortisol. So those types of things. That's what my master's thesis was on, psychological stress and neuroinflammation in the brain. And so I learned a lot more about the science of that, which encouraged me to continue on this road. So that brain sensitivity that I have now is a gift because it really acutely points me in the way that my body needs it to go.
Right. And it helps you to manage your behavior, even though we are living in a culture that says, go, 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 stay awake all night, scroll, 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 have no attention for anything. You have to be very intentional about your intention.
Yes, so intentional. And sometimes that brings me anger. I'm like, why can't I just be out there and, not be so intentional? But this has been, obviously, this is the spiritual piece. I see it as a calling. I see it as an opportunity.
Definitely.
It comes out in the book. I'm turning multiple points of pain in my life into a greater purpose so that we can help humanity with mental health and brain health. And if I do those unconscious things like most of us are habitually just doing in society,
Yes.
if I operate just out of habit versus out of ritual and intention, my brain feels like it's on fire at the end of the night. And that happens to me often because I am eager.
Yes.
And I do want to help and I do want to live a very full capacity life. But when I do so, I have very severe repercussions around it.
But you're also hungry to share. And knowing you, one would never know. Like if they hadn't met you, before knowing about the accident, I would never know that you had a brain injury. So it's really fascinating because how many people are walking around with brain injuries and just trying to cope, which is part of why you wrote the book, right?
Absolutely. I've heard it too, and I know it because I went through the system. I went through trying to figure it out, and I found it on my own. I went to neurooptometrists to reprogram my eyes because they weren't working properly together because there was damage in my occipital lobes, which damages my the nerves that go into my eyes. And so physiotherapists, neurooptometrists, chiropractors, alternative healers, energy workers, sitting in ceremony, like different things like that. I went through all of it. Reached out to neurologists who are there was a neurologist that I reached out to who works at Sick Kids who's using psilocybin and things with stroke in children. So educating myself in that, and that actually is where I did do a training with an organization, Numinous, about psilocybin and its effects on the brain because they talk a lot about it in mental health. And they talk about it as well in brain health and neurological health. So I did research in that regard. So there was lots of learning that I had to do that I would never have known about.
You would and also writing the book, which is an even greater accomplishment, knowing what you are going through and bearing every day. It seems like it's also opened a new pathway. I went to your book launch about a month ago, which was awesome and beautiful, and it was amazing watching your family members and friends look at you while you were talking about your experience, and it felt like people were reliving it. But I was thinking about the questions that you got afterwards, and then just sort of the things that I've been seeing in terms of people saying, can you come and help us, and can we talk to you about this, and like how does it feel for you? Like what pathways are opening up in terms of what you're seeing?
So there's quite a few pathways opening up, which is really interesting. And it's so I don't know if anybody on the who's listening follows human design, but I do,
Yes.
and I'm a projector, and so that has really been like just listening to my energy and putting myself and my message out in the world and waiting for the invitation, and the invitations are starting to come. And so the book has been a tool to who I am. It's an external extension of who I am and what I believe in and how I live and what I want to share with the world, because really my mission is to help improve quality of life for humanity. And so whether it's working with organizations or book clubs or women's groups um, or moms groups, like there's so many. So whether it's working professionals or overwhelmed mothers or parents, lots of people are now engaging and sharing their story with me and asking for more, because people I feel are suffering in silence and feeling like they're alone. But when we talk about the loneliness epidemic, this story is meant to bring us together in community. And that's some of the feedback I've heard, is that the book is helping create a deeper dialogue and a deeper connection when people really talk about the root of what's going on for them versus superficial things.
Can you just take me back by one step? Can you describe what human design is in terms of your, like, how you analyze it?
From my perspective, how I interpret it, there's different types of people in the world and how we operate at our best selves.
Yes.
So there's, a projector is really someone who is a visionary, who shares their wisdom when asked for it, who has a presence and an aura that is opening and welcoming. There's like manifestors and generators and manifestor generators who are really like driving business, driving action. So from my perspective, the way I use it is an energy alignment or an attunement to my true self on how to be in the world. And when I don't align with that, then there's dissonance or disconnect. So it aligns for me with living true, which is True Living is the name of my business. And it aligns for me in that way, because when you live true to how your body's energy is naturally meant to operate in the world, then you create more resonance. You create, it's like organizations who work with strengths-based approaches to leadership. It's the same concept from an energetics
Point of view. And very holistic.
Very holistic.
I know, I love it. I think we should do something like and maybe do a live session around trying to understand how to project and who you are. And so what's fascinating about the work you're doing is that you connect the science, the human design piece, and the spirituality through your perspective. And you're not imposing a point of view, but you're saying, here's the process, here are the tools that I use to think about these issues. What would you tell someone who is maybe dealing with a concussion, or someone in their family who has a concussion and feeling lonely? So, and like they're alone in the world, like I can't figure out how to make sense of all of this.
Yes. So you're not alone. You're not alone. There's so many people unconsciously trying to navigate their way in post-concussion syndrome. And I aligned myself with the Concussion Foundation. So there's one in the US and one in North America, and I shared my story with them. And lots of athletes or people in general share their story. And there's a lot of research happening around brain health and CTE, you know, in the hospitals. I think there's a center in Boston. And what I want people to know is that when you work through those elements of well-being in my book in a way that support your relationship to yourself, because there was an identity loss for me. So there was an identity loss, and I've had a few conversations with other cyclists who've had accidents, but it's like this outlet, this place where you like really love and thrive, and then you can't do that thing anymore. Or athletes, like hockey players. I've heard lots of athletes and football players like retiring, and then it's this loss of identity. So I felt like a huge loss of identity. So I had to redefine my purpose, and that's where it started. And so redefining my purpose in the world and how I was going to live in my life was the start, and finding a new mission that I was going to align with, followed by the mental, physical, emotional, and the spiritual piece was finding the greater reason for this. Like, why me? I could have sat in victim mode Why me? I could have sat in anger, like, this isn't fair. And I was like, okay, thank you for the gift. Thank you for this last learning piece that I needed in order to talk about mental health and brain health. Thank you for slowing me down, because I wasn't slowing down. I wasn't listening. And so if we don't listen to the subtle messages of the universe, you will get those messages delivered louder and stronger. And my wish is for people not to have to experience the loud, strong message of putting their head and face in the side of the road, unconscious,
No.
to slow down.
Yes, yes.
So if you don't slow down, the universe will give you a message. So for those folks out there that are struggling in post-concussion syndrome, you're not alone. And there's lots of tools that you can use that will support your new place in the world, or how you want to proceed moving forward and taking care of your health in this like very diligent and intentional way.
Wow. It's beautiful. And I'm very excited about the way you talk about it. I think you're a different voice in the conversation, and we need many voices. I think also something that you're doing is you're modeling growth resilience. You know, that through trauma and tragedy, we aren't broken always or only broken, that there are all these other ways of light coming in. So thank you for this. Tell us once more, name of the book and where people can find you.
Beautiful. So the name of the book is Claim Your Brain, and it's available at all major online retailers, and it is also available on our website, which is True Living, TRULIVING.ca, and you can access our social media platforms and emails on that website as well.
My goodness. Jocelyn, I'm so grateful for your time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your courage. And I just want to wish you continued well-being, growth, sleep, love, and joy. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, my beautiful friend. This has been an honor.
Thank you. My friends, thank you for joining me on Let's Talk, produced by Wise Mindly Inc. I hope today's conversation inspired you to take action, reflect, or embrace on a new way of thinking, on a new path. And if you enjoyed today's episode, and hopefully you did, don't forget to subscribe, share, and even leave a review. Reviews matter. They allow us to do way more than we're doing now. Let's continue the journey of growth and well-being together. Until next time, I'm Coach Shay Marville. Stay connected, stay curious, and let's keep talking.